Smile and learn.
Hello, hello. How are you today? I have a question for you. Do you like food? I love food. It gives us the energy we need to play, study, think, and be healthy. I'm sure you know that without food, no living thing can survive. Living things get energy from the food we eat. Some can produce their own food, while others get energy by eating plants or other animals. The way energy passes from one living thing to another is called a food chain. Have you ever heard of food chains? We are going to look at them now, but I'm getting a little hungry. So first, I'm going to take a bite of my lamb chops. Yummy! So, what is a food chain anyways? It's a diagram that shows how living things are connected by what they eat. In other words, it tells us how plants and animals depend on each other for food. In fact, I'm part of a food chain right now. Let's see what the food chain looks like when I eat my lamb chops. At the first level, we have grass, a plant that produces its own food through photosynthesis. Then, on the second level, we have a lamb, which eats the grass. Finally, I'm on the last level because I eat the meat from the lamb. There are many food chains. Let's look at another more complex example. Picture a beautiful flower. When the flower needs energy, it makes it from the sun, water, and nutrients from the soil through photosynthesis. But along comes a very hungry caterpillar, and it eats the flower. And then along comes a very, very hungry bird, so it eats the caterpillar. But later, a super hungry coyote comes along and eats the bird. Wow! Now, this story gets a little sad, but it's something that happens to all living things. After a long and happy life, our coyote dies. But don't worry, this is when things get interesting. Now it's time for the bacteria and fungi to do their job. We can't see them, but they're everywhere. They will eat the coyote's body. When they do so, they turn the coyote into nutrients that the plants can use to make their own food. Amazing, right? And so the food chain starts again. As you can see, food chains have different levels, which we call trophic levels. Let's learn about them. Food chains can start with an autotrophic plant or producer that makes its own food. In the example from before, the flower is our producer. But, as we know, not all living things can produce their own food. These living beings are called heterotrophs, and they eat other living things to get energy.
Animals that eat producers are called primary consumers. In this food chain, the caterpillar is our primary consumer.
Next, there are animals that eat the primary consumers. These are called secondary consumers, like the bird in this food chain. Then, animals that eat the secondary consumers are called tertiary consumers, like the coyote in our example. Finally, The fungi and bacteria that decompose the tertiary consumers when they die are the decomposers. Decomposers are very important because they restart the food chain. Thanks to them, it begins all over again. Remember that all living things need energy to live. A food chain helps us to see where living things get their energy. There are different levels within food chains. Let's see if you can put them in order. Got it? Let's see if you have it right. First, we have the producers. Producers are eaten by primary consumers. Primary consumers are eaten by secondary consumers. And secondary consumers are eaten by tertiary consumers. And who makes sure that the cycle starts all over again? Exactly, the decomposers. They do so by eating the tertiary consumers. Wow! Food chains are so interesting, right? We've looked at a couple of examples today. But remember that there are so many food chains on our planet. We'll discover them in the next episode. Don't miss it. See you then! Hello, hello. How are you today? Are you hungry? I am, a little, but I have a snack here. Yummy! I'm sure you remember that food gives us the energy we need to play, study, think, and be healthy. You probably also remember that without food, no living thing can survive. Living things get energy from the food we eat. The way energy passes from one living thing to another is called a food chain. Remember? One way to classify food chains is by the habitats where the living beings in the chain get their food. Let's think about our planet and all the habitats on Earth. How many habitats can you think of? That's it. There are two general types of natural habitats, terrestrial and aquatic. The living things in these habitats form many food chains. So we can classify food chains in two ways, terrestrial food chains and aquatic food chains. Terrestrial food chains. Terrestrial food chains exist both on land and below the surface of the Earth. For example, we find terrestrial food chains in the desert, forest, and savanna. Can you think of any other terrestrial habitats? Come with me. We're going to look at an example. Plants get the energy they need from the sun, water, carbon dioxide, and nutrients from the soil. A primary consumer, like a caterpillar, eats the plant's leaves. Yum! How tasty! Then the caterpillar goes underground. But suddenly, a centipede eats it. Later, a mole comes along and eats the centipede. Delicious! A while later, a hungry snake eats the mole. And just a few hours after that, a hawk swoops down and eats the snake. When the hawk dies, decomposers break down its body and turn it into nutrients that plants use to make their own food. And so this terrestrial food chain begins all over again. Amazing, right? All these living things obtain their food in terrestrial habitats. So we can say that this is a terrestrial food chain. Aquatic food chains. Aquatic food chains occur both in and near water. They happen in rivers, lakes, seas, and oceans, but also along the coast. The living things that make up aquatic food chains get their food from aquatic habitats. They can live in water, like fish, but they can also live on land and eat aquatic living things like bears. That is why we say that aquatic food chains happen both near and in water. Come with me under the sea to see an example. In the ocean, we can find many producers, such as these algae. As we know, algae are plants who get energy through photosynthesis. But, sea snails like them too! Now a hungry eel comes swimming along, sees the snail, and eats it. But then a salmon enters the picture and eats the eel. This is where the story gets interesting. Adult salmon live in saltwater, but they lay their eggs in freshwater. So our salmon leaves the ocean and swims upstream to lay her eggs in a river. Suddenly, boom! A hungry bear wants his dinner. So he walks down to the river looking for fish. Today is his lucky day, and he finds a delicious salmon to eat. Yum! As you can see, even though the bear lives on land, this is an aquatic food chain because all the living things in it get their food from aquatic habitats. Remember, we can classify food chains by the habitats where the living beings in the chain get their food. If all of the living beings get their food from aquatic habitats, even if one of them lives on land, we classify the chain as aquatic. Let's see if you can tell me, are these terrestrial or aquatic food chains? Terrestrial or aquatic? Terrestrial, because the living beings in this food chain get their food from terrestrial habitats. Let's try another one. Aquatic, because the living beings in this food chain get their food from aquatic habitats. Very good. Now for the last one. Terrestrial or aquatic? Aquatic, because although the bear lives in a terrestrial habitat, it and the rest of the living beings in this food chain get their food from aquatic habitats. Great! You did an awesome job! Wow! Food chains are so interesting! In this video, we have seen one way to classify them, but we still have more to learn. See you in the next episode. Bye-bye! Hi, everyone! How is it going? Imagine this situation. You are very hungry after a long day at school. You get home and see that Dad is in the kitchen preparing something. So you ask, "Hey, Dad, what's for dinner?" What would you think if he said, "dead stuff"? Oh my gosh! Believe it or not, the food we eat is not far removed from dead stuff, or even poop. That's what we're going to talk about today. But first, do you remember what a food chain is? A food chain is a process that shows how living things are connected by what they eat. We have already learned to classify aquatic and terrestrial food chains like these. But did you know that there's another way to classify food chains? Let's find out more about it. Green food chains. We have already seen many green food chains, also called predator food chains or grazing food chains. The first level of these food chains is a producer, which, important, is alive and makes its own food through photosynthesis. That's where the name green food chain comes from, because these producers are alive and green, like grass or any other living plant. Brown food chains. On the other hand, brown food chains, also called detritus food chains, don't start with living plants. They start with, you guessed it, dead stuff. Yikes! How is this possible? Well, you know that all living things die. Like plants, for example. Many plants are never eaten while they're alive. They live a long and happy life and then die, leaving their remains. Have you ever gone for a walk in the park in autumn? If you look at the ground, you'll see a lot of dead plant remains, like leaves, branches, and even roots. We call these remains detritus, or dead stuff, and they form the first level of brown food chains. Here, we can see this hungry worm eating some delicious dead stuff. Then, a chicken eats the poor worm. And later, a human eats the chicken. Wow! See? We're not too far removed from dead things in brown food chains. Brown food chains are extremely important for sustaining the Earth's ecosystems. In fact, 90% of the food chains on Earth are brown. Amazing, right? Did you know that when a whale dies and sinks to the bottom of the ocean, it creates food chains that can exist for months or even years? It's all because of the dead whale's detritus. This is what happens. The whale lives a long and happy life and then dies. The whale's body is converted into detritus with the help of the bacteria and fungi in the water. Then, other living creatures like crabs eat that detritus. Then, a fish eats one of those crabs. An octopus eats the fish. And a shark eats the octopus. Later, the shark dies, sinks to the bottom of the ocean, and with the help of those super cool bacteria and fungi becomes, you guessed it, detritus, a scrumptious meal for a hungry crab. And so the brown food chain starts all over again. Pretty incredible, isn't it? Remember that green food chains start with living plants and brown food chains start with dead stuff. such as plant remains, animal remains, or even poop. Green or brown? Brown, because it starts with plant remains. Dead stuff. On to the next one. Green or brown? Green, because it starts with grass, which is a producer that is alive. On to the last one. Green or brown? Brown, because it starts with detritus or remains of the whale. See what I'm saying? Most food chains are brown. Great work! You've done a super job! So, even if you don't really feel like eating dead stuff for dinner, the animals we eat, or the ones they eat, sure do. Aren't food chains interesting? Now we know that there are many ways to classify them. Bon appetit! See you next time!
We've learned so much in just one video. Did you know there are many more videos? Imagine how much you could learn. Subscribe to the Smile and Learn educational channel to learn and have fun at the same time.